A lot of television stations around here have been reporting on a strange creature that has been spotted and even photographed by some hunters. Everywhere from California as far as Minnesota, apparently. Most people believe that this is probably a Bigfoot, but there's a growing number in our local community that claims it might be something more, maybe like a dogman. What is now being seen in a few photographs obtained by several hunters around here is some kind of strange hairy hominid. It appears to be tall and slender, perhaps around 6 feet. Some say this creature could very well be an undiscovered species that we've yet to name or classify. My encounter is very similar to what has been described. I know there's things going around, and there's also dogman, known as type 1 or type 2. You're the expert here, not I. So maybe you can help me and determine what exactly we're seeing. My own sighting happened around the summertime of 2008 at around 10 p.m. at night. I had decided to go out for a walk through the woods, all behind my house. I noticed something moving in between the trees at first. I thought it was a deer, but it came closer and stopped abruptly, not far away from me, and then to my dismay, standing up on its hind legs, towering high above me, staring directly at my face. This was not a deer. It was black and had long hair and even longer legs. It didn't appear to have paws, but rather large hands with claws, completely covered in fur. It was a very dark shade of black, jet black, actually. The face was more human than animal-like, terrifying by the look of it. It almost kind of reminded me personally of half man, half bear. As ridiculous as that sounds, that's what it reminded me of. The mouth was a little bit larger, lots of teeth, very scary, especially the eyes. This thing stared at me directly for several minutes before I decided to slowly walk away, back inside the house, screaming for my dad. My father comes out running into the yard, thinking somebody was trying to break in, a loaded gun in his hands. He said afterwards he saw something black standing there at the woodline, watching him. The encounter scared me so bad that I've never really returned on the backside of my house, at least not there. I'm not sure if this creature is gone by any other names. I can't exactly say it was a dogman or a Bigfoot, but it's definitely something new and terrifying. I haven't really read much reports on it. My father's now more of a believer than he ever has, especially that night. Now, he tells me there are several other families in our town that live in our country who have had very similar eyewitness accounts of seeing these strange creatures. I guess a lot of people around here also talk about hearing growling noises being made from somewhere around in the woods, since our county is very rural and very, very woodsy. It seems like there's always places here in America that have these kind of sightings going on. This particular creature, we're not sure what it is, has become a very popular subject to talk about over the past year or so. Even, I guess, making it into some episodes of paranormal and true crime shows. It seems like people are starting to believe after seeing hard evidence that's been provided by many researchers. But it's interesting. Not everybody sees them in exactly the same way. There are some definitive similarities between all the accounts, which led me to believe it could be an undiscovered species, as opposed to being something supernatural, like a ghost or a demon, or a cryptid. I've decided that I would rather contact you. I know your expertise is needed when dealing with topics like these. I'm not sure if you've heard of this creature before, or have seen the pictures that have been posted online, but it seems like there's a lot more to the story than we're being told. Some people say it could be the form of an ape, or maybe a Bigfoot-like creature, since I guess there was one sighting here around 1993. Someone also needs to investigate further too, maybe even get in contact with researchers across the globe who are studying different types of wildlife. My dad mentioned hearing about something with an American zoologist who knows something about the cryptozoology subject. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. He's supposed to be one of the more smarter and well-known scientists, so maybe it's worth a shot for us to contact him. My father also claimed that this black creature was more active during the summer months, when people are out camping, fishing, and hiking, which may explain why there have been more sightings during this time period, rather than other times of year, where not as many people are outside. A lot of people think that this creature may even be something new that is recently brought over from Africa, using the animals that were smuggled into America or even genetically engineered by possibly a top secret government organization. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but it's definitely worth checking out. My mother very recently has expressed an interest in trying to find out more info about this subject. She had never mentioned it before. This really surprised me. She's always been pretty skeptical of these things since they usually never end up being true, like the recent hoaxes making people think that aliens have landed somewhere in America. She thinks that if we can figure out some solid proof of our own, which will be hard, considering my father and I are the only ones that I know that have seen this thing in our circle of family, then maybe we'll have something significant enough for others to believe us. Maybe you or somebody else in your audience can help us out. It would be great if we could get to the bottom of this creature's origin. Maybe we can help solve a mystery that has been around for way too long. I had an encounter with what I think was a dogman back in 2014. I was walking in a very wooded area across from my house. It was late November, so there were no leaves on the trees, no foliage to block my sight. It was about 3 in the morning, and you could see pretty far in the woods from where I was outside, due to the bright moonlight. I heard branches break into my left, and saw something strange standing there on 2 legs. That's when it noticed me, and began to run towards me at full speed. My first thoughts were maybe that somebody ran through the woods, possibly on drugs or what. Then, as it got closer, I noticed its head size and defined jawline. This was the head of a dog, or a wolf. It looked directly at me, but did not slow down, and continued to run right past me through the woods. I was terrified. I pulled out my phone, dialing 911, telling them what had just happened. They seemed very uninterested, until I told them more details about this sighting. That's when they accused me of pranking them. I tried to reassure them that this thing was still chasing me and in pursuit of me. They told me they would send somebody to check out the area, but when I arrived home, about 40 minutes later, there were no police and no sign of anything unusual having ever happened. A few years ago, I was driving south, interstate, in my hometown at night. It was close to midnight on a Saturday. I had just gotten off work at a Bass Pro Shop, about an hour or so before that. This was located in Granville, Michigan. It's quiet here for the most part where I live. Not much traffic at night. As I was driving, one thing about our interstate though, is it has 2 lanes going eastbound and westbound for each direction of travel. It's a 4-lane highway, but they only ever set up 2 lanes on either side. But there are 4 lanes to signify where the other 2 lanes would be if they were actually put in use. There is always so little traffic traveling at that hour, and you could see pretty far in the distance on both sides of the road, with very little obstructions to block your view as you're driving, which is why when something strange ran out in front of me, right as I was passing a car traveling in the opposite direction, it first caught my attention. It was night and my vision driving isn't the best. I wasn't going more than 30 miles per hour at most, and I was just about to come up on another vehicle in front of me, which was also going very slow. And then we both see this thing. I know because I saw them react. This 4-legged creature running across the 4th lane into my lane. I saw the silhouette in the distance, and then it ran right towards our vehicle. This is how I remember it looking. It was running straight towards our vehicles. Its body, from what I could tell, looked more like a large lion, if that's a silly enough description, right? The head had a large mane around it, very pointy ears, and the head was kind of canine-like, but also seemed reptilian at the same time, if that makes any sense at all. Although the head shape was more visible than the face, there was no eyes or anything visible from where I was driving. It happened all so fast that it disappeared very quickly on the other side. This caused the vehicle in front of me to slam on their brakes. Now, I drove around trying to see if I could find anything, but I couldn't. I even remember telling my brother, who was in the car with me, about it, saying if I ever saw one of those things running around here in real life, I would be done. That thing freaked me out, and it wasn't just some sort of animal. What was it? I hardly believe in Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but this was something else entirely. Like I said, it looked like some sort of large, freakish lion hybrid or something. I don't know. It reminded me of something you'd see on Animal Planet, or maybe National Geographic, or one of those shows where they get into the jungle looking for rare animals. This wasn't found anywhere else in the world, except our interstate that I know of. But my brother, who's actually really big into scary stories, found your channel and directed me to you in hopes that maybe you could kind of solve our problem. What did we see? What kind of creature did we encounter that night? Was this something more, or could this have been a hybrid or some sort? Maybe this thing was designed in a lab. But why was it so huge? I just have so many questions with not enough answers. I'm hoping you could help. This was back in 1999, and I went camping with a few of my close buddies. I know it was on a Friday, because that's when I got off work, and when I went to go meet up with my friends. At the time, we were up in northern Maine, close to the Canadian border, although we had never seen any hard evidence of unusual activity. There have been some pretty weird sightings in the area over the years. The local Native American tribe in the region call this particular creature the wolf spirit. It's thought that they may worship him as an ancestor, but nobody really knows for sure. It could just be a story they tell their children to keep them from wandering around at night or something. Whatever the case, this has all taken place up near where my friends live, not far from Andre Lake. That site alone, though, has had many alleged sightings of this particular wolf spirit. That's what I'm almost sure of that we saw that day. It had been raining pretty steadily, but it was just beginning to get dark, so we decided to hop in the truck and ride out to a clearing that we had seen on an earlier trip. This was not our first rodeo. We had gone camping multiple times. This spot was way back in the woods, right beside a small stream, thick with trees and brush at all sides. This was not a typical campground spot. This was kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and it would be easy for somebody or something to hide there without ever being spotted by anybody traveling along the road that leads into it. Now, the clearing is about as big as 2 or 3 football fields put together. Perhaps even more if you include the area up near where some of the vehicles were parked. We only had 2 that weekend. There's also a dirt road that cuts through the center of it. Not really wide enough for any cars to drive down, but big enough for ATVs or some 4x4s. At the far end of the clearing is a collection of fallen trees, looking something right out of Lord of the Rings. The first thing we did was we got all set up. All 4 tents were put up, and we started a fire. Not too close by, though. You don't want your tent going up in flames if some embers get kicked around by some careless camper, or my stupid buddies. Then, we built some makeshift benches using fallen branches, which we stuck in the mud on either side of the fire pit. Things were going great, getting everything set up, until we began hearing strange noises in the woods all around us. The first time we heard it, we just thought it might be a wolf or something. It wasn't until later when I realized how unnatural the sound actually was. It's hard to describe exactly what it sounded like, almost like somebody choking but groaning. We weren't too off-put by it at first, and so we ignored it, doing our best to set up our tents and stuff. The sounds started getting more frequent. We had kept a Coleman lantern hanging from the top of one of our tents. We thought it would help keep the mosquitoes away. We hung it out by the tent, and sometimes we could see shadows moving in strange ways. We began to feel a little creeped out. I think it was around this time we realized someone or something might really be out there messing with us. I didn't have any of my necessary camping gear with me, like flashlights and knives. I was getting worried. My friend just told me to go back to where our cars were parked and get my knife, but I was reluctant to leave. He assured me we'd be fine. My friend and another one of our camping buddies had gone to go get some firewood. They had walked up to the far end of the clearing, where we were pretty confident nothing would bother them. I didn't want to leave them alone, though, but they insisted. I reached the cars and ran quickly over to mine, searching like a madman for my pack. I was just about to give up when I spotted it under the passenger seat. I turned and started jogging back in the direction of my tent. I didn't want to turn around, but I was afraid there was somebody walking right behind me, so close that they might grab me if I didn't pay attention. It was really hard not to look back, but I pushed myself and did what I could, running right into a tree head first. I fell to the ground, slid a few feet. My knee was bleeding, and I had some pretty nasty scratches. I picked myself up and made it back to camp. We had the supplies we needed, and my friends looked at me funny for running into a tree, but I explained to them that I swore something or someone was following me. The two friends of mine who had gone to get firewood at this point had come back, and while I was gone, they seemed pretty freaked. They said they could have sworn that something large was stalking them in the trees while they were gathering firewood. They were both kind of white. We stayed up for a while longer, but at some point, ultimately decided to put the fire out, make sure all of the flashlights we had were charged before going to bed. This was the start of a very long night. After gathering in our tents, we agreed to keep the lanterns and flashlights on a high setting, just in case. My tent was closest to the cars, about 200 feet away. We wanted to make sure that nobody or nothing would come in the camp, or if someone or something did, we could see them. I laid down in my sleeping bag, turned on my flashlight, which I had positioned so that it would shine up towards the top of the tent, onto the ceiling. My friend began talking about his scouting days in high school, and how he used to camp a lot, talked to his friends about how he believed in ghosts and all that paranormal stuff. The whole time, I was trying to listen, but also keep my eyes on the woodland canopy and the woods in general. My friend began talking about how when he had a nightmare, that there was actually this werewolf stalking him to the forest while he was camping. He said that after that, he realized how much stories like that actually really scared him. And I remember my heart skipped a beat when he said that. I had to remind him about the time he swore a mountain lion was stalking us and displayed his nightmare. A noise around us broke the silence, and I shushed him. We were looking at each other, wide-eyed, as we could hear something big moving around, coming out of the woodline and close to our camp. It stopped for a moment, and then we all heard this low grunting noise. More movement, stopping. More movement, stopping. Whatever this was, or whoever it was, had to have been huge. Then, again, the sound stopped. We remained staring at each other, in complete fear, thinking some psycho is out there and is going to kill us. Then, out of nowhere, we hear this large piece of wood get thrown and smashed up against another tree. We all about jumped out of our sleeping bags, now completely terrified. Then, we start hearing more strange noises just outside the bounds of our camp. It sounded like a low growling, angry growling, and we were so scared that we shut off our lights. When that happened, I swear, it was like an invitation for this thing to start walking into our campsite. We could hear these large footsteps, long, slow steps, one by one. It seemed as though whatever was walking around, maybe 10 feet from our tent, was big enough to make the ground shake with each step. These noises were coming closer and closer. Then we heard a loud whoosh noise. It was very loud. It almost hurt my ears. I told my friends that I was just going to run fast as I could for the car. They should do whatever they wanted. They said okay, and they may not follow me. I told them it was their choice, but we had to get out of there. After that, the noises stopped, and it became quiet again, like whoever or whatever it was listening intently to us talking back and forth. I made a break for it. I jumped up, unzipped the tent, and just ran full on towards the car. I ran in the dark, not even taking my flashlight with me. I figured I would have died if I left it on. I get to the driver's side door, unlocked it, and instantly, the headlights come on and illuminate something that looked like it came from hell. About 150 feet away, coming after me in the dark, directly in front of the vehicle, was this creature that was now fully illuminated by the headlights. It looked like a werewolf if I'd ever seen one, but it also kind of resembled a baboon too. It was hideous, and it had these yellow glowing eyes. It turned and lifted up its arm to shield its face from the light. I panicked, jumped in the car, turning it on all the way, and I start honking at this thing. It slowly lowered its arm, and this thing was pissed, so it turned and ran off into the woods on the side. I roll the window down, and I start yelling at my friends. The coast is clear, get in the car now, we need to leave. They all listen, surprisingly, and come barreling out of the tents, running straight for me, terrified. After a few more seconds, they jump in and just literally pile in the car. We floor it, and we peel out of there as fast as possible, leaving behind our other tents, the other vehicles, all of our supplies. None of that mattered in that moment. And now we were going a good 60 miles an hour, and we could see this thing from the rear start to chase after our vehicle. It ran really strange, very strange. It ran on two legs, but it kind of dangled and wobbled. It started catching up to us, and now we were all screaming. That's when one of my friends yelled out that there's more of them coming out of the trees. More began accumulating and running after our vehicle. I think at some point or another, we lost them, but we were all scared beyond what normal fear is like. I mentioned at the beginning of this story about how some of us believe it's the wolf spirits that the natives around the area have talked about for a long time. They supposedly guard the whole area. I don't know. I'm probably wrong. I just know that it's the most terrifying experience of my life. I can't get it out of my head. I'm still recovering from the shock of it all. I've never been so scared before. I'm a believer that there may be other creatures out there like this that are still undiscovered. There's so many places here in the US where it could be, and nobody knows about it. Maybe we'll never know if those spirits were really protecting us, or if they would have killed us that night out of fear to protect their territory from intruders who may threaten their food. Following the Native American religions, they say that some of these spirits, like skinwalkers and such, they're here to protect the territory, but others, like the skunk ape, are out to kill. Some even believe that there are creatures like the dogman, who has no place. Whatever they were, or whatever they are, it's just one of those experiences we'll never forget. I say, we probably got lucky, and these things chased us off. We were so scared by this event that we actually never went back and grabbed our equipment. I mean, we went back and grabbed our vehicles, don't get me wrong, but we were too scared to set foot down in that clearing and grab our tents. Even though that was 21 years since this happened, by then, me and my buddies, the fear was so real, you could taste it. It was like a fear you get when you watch a scary movie, and then from out of nowhere, it hits you with these chills. It's that same tumultuous feeling. I'm positive that to this day, whatever we encountered on that night in '99 did not want us there. That sense of being threatened by these creatures is what really sticks out. For the record, nobody else ever went back out there after this had happened. And I've pondered for a long time about whether I should have shared this story. I'm not sure why or what made me finally decide to come forward and let people know that these creatures are still around. And maybe I want people to know about this so they won't go looking for them or try to discover them. Whatever the case may be, I'm glad that I told my story. Maybe it will help somebody else out there who has seen or heard about these creatures and are too scared to say anything due to ridicule. The reason why there's no names mentioned between me and my buddies is, again, I really don't want to be ridiculed or have anybody come looking for us. That was the scariest day of my life. I pray that nobody has an experience like this. Sorry again for the long story, but I thought it was important to share my piece. When I was 8 years old, my parents used to own a large piece of land that they inherited from my father's side of the family. It was sold shortly after this incident. The land, or the back half, was filled with trees, lots of oak, fir, and just general thick brush. It was untamed wilderness. I remember my parents saying it was never a place you would want to go. One beautiful fall morning, I decided to run down the path that led from our backyard over and into this area. I had done this countless times before, but my parents always warned me about going too far in there. We had coyotes and mountain lions, and due to it being so thick in brush and dense, it wasn't exactly safe for an 8-year-old boy. Anyway, for some reason, I thought nothing of it. I ran over across the field along a path far from where our house was, and up to around a cluster of trees, further than I'd ever gone before, untouched by anyone, ever, except for my family. I was then startled instantly by this intense scream coming out of nowhere, right about at my 9 o'clock. I froze. I didn't know what to do or where it came from. The whole area was a deafening silence. Nothing moved. No animals or nature were making noises, which is strange for being in the middle of nowhere, an untamed forest stretching across several acres. I slowly started moving towards the cluster of these untouched trees ahead of me, and once again, I heard another scream, and it sounded exactly like the first one, only this one was louder. I could feel this terrible feeling coming over me. It was a fear that you could never imagine. Something was out there with me. I wasn't alone. I was being watched by someone or something, and I began to move faster towards the untouched trees, as I thought it would be better to hide there. When I got to this cluster of trees, I heard it again, but this time, there were other noises with it. Falling branches, rustling, breaking. Whatever was out there was getting closer to me, and it sounded like whatever it was moving from tree to tree following me. I had no idea what to do, so I slowly backed away from the untouched trees, but not before it happened again. This time, the scream lasted for a good 5 seconds, and my whole body sunk into defeat as I realized that there was nothing I could do to stop whatever animal this was from ultimately hurting me. This wasn't a deer. This wasn't anything that I knew of from the traditional animal kingdom. I needed to get out of here, and I needed to act fast. No matter how much I wanted to, my legs would not move. The screaming stopped as quick as it started. It was dead silent, and I heard heavy footsteps moving quickly through the brush and towards me. Instantly, I fell over in fear, just waiting for whatever this thing was to make its way over to me. Once it got close enough, I could hear the sound of its heavy breathing, which was heavy and erratic, as something went wrong. It sounded like a mix between a horse, a bear, and a dog. Maybe it was just an old sick animal that had somehow gotten hurt, and maybe managed to survive out here. All these thoughts rushing through my head to try and explain away what it was that I might be experiencing. But I didn't know. I tried my best to pull myself up and ran as fast as I could. I made it over the fence and back to my house, nearly tripping and falling all along the way. Imagine that, being only 8 years of age, though I was very frightened by whatever large animal was coming after me. It sounded like I had made it angry, hence why it was coming at me so hard. As soon as I got back into the house, I told my father exactly what I was freaking out about, and he looked at me extremely strange. It tells me there's nobody out there. It's all private property. I must just be hearing things. I explained to him, even at 8 years old, I told him over there that there was some large animal chasing me, and that it seemed to be upright on 2 legs. I begged him to go look, but of course he wouldn't even entertain it. I had convinced myself there was nothing out in the woods that night. Now, flash forward to about a year later, and we had moved. I think at some point or another, my own father had an encounter with something like I did, because during the winter, for a short while I went to go spend some time away with my grandparents, he seemed different afterwards. He stopped going outside by his shed, which bordered the thickness of the land. He quit taking me out there back in the winter to go play. Sometimes, I think he saw something, but it seems that he was eager to get us to move out of there afterwards. We ended up actually moving that spring, and even to this day, my father refuses to talk about it and acts like that story of mine I just shared never happened.